they should put on Chavdal Ramanal by the Mishnah, about 3/4 of the way down. It's like the Mishnah. Amalei nemanalai Abba nemanalai Avicha nemanalai Shloisha Roi Baka. We didn't do this yet, right?
No.
We saw it before. So he said to one party said to the other, of course, your father, my father, or your father, they're both puzzled to be Dayanim, but I'm going to allow it. I'm going to be Michael and allow them to be. I'm going to accept their decision. I'm just going to accept 3 people who know nothing about any dinim. Rameya says he can retract after he makes this concession. He can then decide, I was foolish. I'm changing my mind. Racham say no. Once you say it, it's cast in stone. You can't retract. And a similar thing, because one was mechuyev to make a shvua to his chaver. And he said, the shvua normally is you got to go to Bezdin and you got to pick up a Sefer Torah. He said, I'm going to allow you to do a lighter shvua. You could just make a darli, with lashon neder, make a neder by the life of your head. When you make an informal shvua, you're just going to say, I'm making a shvua, but he's not going to go to Bezdin. I'm accepting from you an informal shvua. Rameya says again, afterwards he thinks better of it. And he says, I really want the real shvua. I don't want this mumbo jumbo shvua. The person who made the concession can then retract it. Chacham will say, no, once you said it, too late. No backsies. Amr Abdimi, Breder of Nachman. Talk to Gemara. Amr Abdimi, Breder of Nachman, Breder of Yosef. They say it's even if it's talking about where he was makabel, even one of the 3 dayanim. It's not what he said all 3 dayanim. Not necessarily. He said shloisha roi baka. He says even if it's just one of the dayanim, that he said he's not. The Chacham will still say he said I am makabel your father or my father. Even one of them. Rameyo still will say Yachalach, even though there's 2 other Dayanim who are perfectly good Dayanim, and he only took one Dayan who's not really technically allowed. Still, Rameyo, the way Rashi says, Rameyo would still say he could be Chayzer. Amrav Yudam Shmuel. Yudam Shmuel says, we just said it's talking about 2 litigants, 2 people who are at a din Torah. He says, Machlaikas b'machalach. This machlaikas that Rameya says you could be chayzer and the Chum say you can't, is only where the person who is conceding to take, who's allowing you to use this dayan, who's not a real dayan, who's not like my father, your father, he's talking about where he's being moichel, where the typical case that we're talking about in this parak and this masechta is a din Torah, a din mominus about a halva, one owes money to the other. So we're talking about where the person who is saying, I am owed money, says, I'm Michael, I'm going to allow you to use your father as a dayan. So it's the person who's being teveya moment, the plaintiff. He's saying, you owe me money. He's saying, I'm going to let you keep your money even if you use a dayan who's not so good. But if it's the other way around, if the person who is the nitva, the defendant who's being asked to give money, he says, I'll pay you the money, which is obviously a higher bar, right? You could always be Michael money. That you could be Michael money, there doesn't have to be a reason behind it. But the etemlach, you need a kinyan. And he's saying, I'll even pay you the money that you're saying I owe you if you use your father as a dayan, and he agrees. Over there, even the Chacham will agree in that case you could be chayzer, because that's a higher bar to be able to put in a dayan who's not a kosher dayan, where he's going to take away money from someone. To be Michael money, then everyone would agree like to Rabbi Yehuda. That's what I'm saying. The machlokes is by machalach, But be'etelach, everyone will agree to Rabbi Yehud, to Rameya, that you could be chayzer. Rabbi Yochanan Amar be'etelach machlokes. Rabbi Yochanan says the machlokes is be'etelach. It's the other way around. The machlokes is not. It's not like you said only by machalach, but the machlokes is even be'etelach, where he said, "I'm going to give money based on this decision." Ibayalu be'etelach machlokes have machal debe'akol and yochalach. So by Yaduma bein bezu machlokes. Rabbi Yochanan was not clear. Rabbi Yehuda Shmuel was very clear. He said the machlokes is only about machalach. By be'etelach debe'akol yochalach. So by Rabbi Yochanan says be'etelach machlokes, but he didn't clarify what would be the din according to him. Be'machalach, is he saying like the reverse of what the first of what Rabbi Yehuda Shmuel said? That he's saying be'etelach is a machlokes, but by machalach debe'akol, everyone will agree. Remeya will be masim the chacham that he can't be chayzer, like we said, because machalach is easier to give away. Since all Rabbi Yochanan says was be'etelach machlokes, maybe he means it doesn't make a difference what the character, who was the one who said it, whether it was the tevei or the nitva about this money that's owed, whether it's the defendant or the plaintiff. Tashma Damar Rabba machlokes be'etelach. Rabbi Rabba says, just like Rabbi Yehuda Shmuel says. I'm sorry, he says just like Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says be'etelach machlokes. Rabba also says be'etelach machlokes. But then he continues, machalach debe'akol and yochalach saba. So if you say Rabbi Yochanan was saying be'etelach machlokes, machal debe'akol and yochalach saba, Rabba Damak Rabbi Yochanan. If you understand Rabbi Yochanan the same way that Rabba had just said, so we could understand Rabba saying over the same sheet as Rabbi Yochanan. Liyamar bein bezu machlokes. Rava da'ava kaman. If you say Rabbi Yochanan is saying that there's a machlokes both be'etelach and b'machalach, then who is Rava saying? Like, it's like Gemara. What do you mean? These are all Amoraim. Rava da'imit nafshei kaman. Maybe Rava einachanam. Maybe there's three sheets. Rava's not saying both from Yehuda or Rabbi Yehuda Shmuel. Einachanami. Maybe Rabbi Yochanan is saying that there's a machlokes both by etelach and by machalach, and Rava is saying that that the machlokes is only by etelach, but by machalach everyone's going to agree. Rameh is going to be maskim and yachalach. So we have three sheets. Eser Ravacha bar Tachlifa l'Rava. Ravacha bar Tachlifa said, asks a kasha on Rava. Rava again is the mandam who said the machlokes is by etelach, but by machalach everyone is going to agree that he can't be chayzer. He asks a kasha on the same form of Mishnah. If one person was responsible to make a shvur to the other, the typical cases of shvur are moed b'mixus or shvuas hesis, or eid echad. These are cases where a person is mechuyev. You can't force him to pay if you only have one aid. But for someone who's a moed b'mixus, the nitva, the defendant, has to make a shvur. And he said, I'll accept from you. You're mechuyev to make a shvur. I'll accept this pseudo shvur, not a real bezdin shvur with a sefer Torah. Rather, you could just make an impromptu, informal shvur. Rameya says if he changes his mind, you could say, no, I want the formal shvur. But Gemara, my lab, it's talking about the typical case of a shvur, which is like we said, a moed b'mixus, or there's an eid echad that the Torah says the person who's being asked for the money, right? All these cases, it's not the person who's asking for the money, who's saying you owe me money, who makes the shvur. Rather, it's the person who's saying I don't owe money. The havlei kamachalach. So it's similar. It's the same stance as machalach, and we're still saying that there's a machlokes or meir and the chachamim about whether you could be chayzer. So you see that so l'chayra, it's a raya not like a Rava. Rava had said it could be against Rabbi Yochanan because you don't know if Rabbi Yochanan is chaylik on Rava, but it's l'chayra certainly a kasha on Rava who says that b'machalach everyone, even Rameh, is masking to chachamim. No, it says we're talking about those unusual cases. There are unusual cases, like certain types of, Rashi says certain types of seichrim, certain types of laborers, where we say that where he comes to ask for his money at the end of the day, and the balabas says, I think the balabas says, I don't owe you any money, or I don't remember. So we say it's typical for balabas. He has a lot of people working with him. Taka doesn't remember so clearly who he owes money to. So we say in that case, the laborer, can make a shvua to take away money from the other. So maybe that's the case that we're talking about here. It's not necessarily a case of machalach, where the person is foregoing the money that's owed to him. It could even be by a shvua, a case of etanlach. And that's where the machlekes are made. The chum is, but maybe enochanami, like Rava said, the machalach, in the typical case of a shvua, enochanami remei will be moided to the chum. Correcting Marva, Tanale Reisha. Then they're going to ask if that's the case. If it's also talking about the case by Nishboin V'Noitlan, so why do we have to say separately both the case of someone who agreed to take a judge who's not technically a kosher judge, as well as the case of someone who agreed to accept a shvua that's not the standard shvua? While they're both talking about someone who's, according to Rava, they're both talking about the case of etenlach, only where the person is saying, I'm going to give you. But if it would be the other way around, if it would be machalach or nishbayin, shveloi mishalmin, then according to Rava, Remeya would be masking. So why do we need both of these? Why do we need both the Reish and the Seif of the Mishnah if they're both saying the same thing? So tomorrow, Tana le Reish v'Tana Tana Tala b'Das Acherim v'Tana Tala b'Das Atzmai. They're different because in the case of where he's masking to take on judges, so then he's not saying I'm ready to pay you based on what you do. It's still going to need a court decision, even though I'm taking a judge who normally would not be allowed, but I'm still putting it up to the judge to then decide. So there, he has more reason to say he's not so the person who is masking to take this non-judicial judge. He's not really ready to give up the case. He's hoping he's still going to win. So if he changes his mind, say, you know what, I made a mistake, I shouldn't have done it. But Tana B'Das Atzmai, the case where he agreed to let the other person make a non-judicial shvuah, so it's totally up to the other party. He could just go ahead right away, make the shvuah, and it's going to happen. So there he really already was going medas, he already made up his mind, and he essentially gave up the case. So there he can't be chayzer. Utzricha. You need both of them. If we just said the Reisha of the Mishnah, which is where he agreed to take a judge who's not a kosher judge, but it's dependent on someone else. That's what Rameir said you could be chayzer. Because he's not going, he doesn't make up his mind. He's still hoping that he's going to win, even with this judge who's not even who's an egei. Maybe Ramey is master Rabbanan that he can't be chayz. That's why we need both of them to say that they're not, that both Rameir and the Chacham are not chayzer in the case of Toilab Das Atzmai and Toilab Das Acher. Want this? Amar Reish Lakish, Machlokes Lufnei Gemar Din. Reish Lakish says this whole question that we're talking about whether if you added a judge, if one of the parties agreed to take a judge who's an Egei B'davar, he's a Karavar, he's his father or your father. That's all before the judges came to a decision. Even Rameir is masking. Once they came to a decision, you can't go back and say, oh, now that I thought about it, that which I agreed to take your father as a judge, that was foolish. You can't, after the decision was made, say, I changed my mind. Rabbi Yochanan says the other way around. Rabbi Yochanan says, even after the Gemar Din, according to Rameir, the person who agreed to use the other person's father as a dayan can change his mind and say, that was a foolish decision. Let's do this all over again. Seems unfair, no?
Gross unfair, sort of waste of time.
Right, we went through the whole, then you agreed. I went and got my father, I schlepped him in from Eretz Yisrael to come be a dayan, and you agreed to it. And now you're saying, okay, let's start over again. Yeah. Iboyalu, I want to ask a question on this. La'achag madin machloikis. It's very similar to the Gemara, the question we had in the previous Gemara. You're saying la'achag madin machloikis. The machloikis is la'achag madin. What do you mean by that? Aval ifnei madin devei akol yachal achsabai. But before the madin, even a mayor, even the chacham would say he could be chayzer. I don't bein bezu machloikis. Or do you say, I know the machlokes is the same whether before the Gmadin or after Gmadin. The mayor is going to say, Yachalach Sabai. The Chacham will say you can't. Zok the Gemara, Tashma Adama Rabba, Kibble of Karavai Pasal, if Negbadin Yachalach Sabai, Lachavadin Yachalach Sabai. Now this is different than the Rabba before. Before Rabba had said that the machlokes is only by Kibble of Karavai Pasal. Over here, he said it as a psak. So now we can't say the same teretz like we said before, that it's that Rav is saying a different shita, because Rav is not saying this is my shita what the machlokes is. He's saying what the psak halacha is. On the psak halacha, he must be saying l'chayr. The Gemara is assuming he must be saying like someone else. So yeah, Rabbi Sham lachag madin machlokes. I will take madin yachalach zaboy Rav Adam Rabbi Yechanan. Then Rav is saying like Rabbi Yechanan, Aliba the Rabbanan, and he's paskening like the Rabbanan, right? Because he's paskening over here. So he's saying like Rabbi Yechanan, who says that the machlokes is only la'achag madin, and but lifnei madin, everyone says yachalach zaboy the chama masma to Rabbanan to Ramei. Ve'alai amrit bein bezu machlokes Rava amakaman. Allah shmami no la'achag gumar din machlokes. Va'istai said einachanami in the end, but the machlokes is even la'achag madin. That's where Remeir and the Chachamim are arguing, but Lifnei Gmadin, Rabbi Yochanan would also learn, just like Rava said, that everyone's going to agree to Remeir that you could be chayzer. Shmamina, einachavana. Now the Gemara is just going to go through what the psakim on these dinim that we've just brought. Shalach Rav Nachman bar Rav Chizda Rav Nachman bar Yaakov Lambeinu Rabbeinu Lifnei Gmadin machlokes ad la'achag Gmadin machlokes. First of all, do we say the machlokes is that they could be chayzer on what they could be chayzer on what he agreed to take his father as a dayan? Is that only lifnei gmadin, or is it la'achag gmadin? Halach kedevrei mish, halach kedevrei mi. Where's the machlokes between Chacham and Rebbeir, and who is the halacha like? So la'achag gmadin machlokes. It's like we said, b'shem Rava who paskin that's what Rabbi Yechanan was saying. So he's quoting that halacha. So halacha is taka like Rava said. The la'achag gmadin is the machlokes. Halacha kedivei chamin. The halacha is like the chachamim. The la'achag gmadin ein yachalach sabai. We take a paskin that you can't be chayzer la'achag gmadin. But before the gmadin, even the chacham maskim that you could be chayzer. Ravashi amahachi shalach lei. He says it was a haki shalach lei. It was a different question that he had asked what the psak is. Because Shul L'chayr we already saw from Rav what the machlokes is. We're talking about the original question that we had said earlier, the first question that Gemara brought. Are we talking about, is the machlokes Ramei and the Chacham in the Mishnah, is it be'etan lach, even when a person says, I'm willing to give you money based on the decision of the judges, or is it only where he says, I'm willing to concede that you don't have to pay me, which is a lower standard? So is even where he says that, is that only on that lower standard that we say that Eina Yachalach Saba? Balach Kedivei Mi, and who do we pass on like Ramei and the Chacham? Shalach Lei be'etan lach machlokes. The machlokes is by etan lach. On etan lach, the Chachamim will the Chachamim Ramei would still say Yachalach Saba. Balach Kedivei Chacham, and Allah is like the Chachamim that Ein Yachalach Saba. That's the way we learned in Surya. In Pumbedisa, they had a different version of what the question that they sent about the halachas. Amar Chanina bar Shalmei, Shachal and Meir Rav l'Shmuel, Yomdeinu Rabbeinu, L'fnei bar Gemar Din. If it's before the Gemar Din, the Konami Yadin, what happens if he said, I'm asking that you should use your father as a dayan, and he makes a kinyan to reinforce. He says, here's this handkerchief, I'm picking up the handkerchief, to make a kinyan, to set in concrete this that I'm being masking that you could use your father as a dayan. What's the din? Can he be chayzer? Shalchu ein lacha kinyan klum. According to everyone, once you make a kinyan, there's no longer a possibility of being chayzer according to everyone, even according to Ramey, who says, once you make a kinyan, there's nothing to talk about. Okay, we're up to the Mishnah on Chavdalit Amud Beis. The Elu Hain, Zok the Mishnah, Elu and Hapsulin. These are those that are puzzled to be Dayanim. We're talking about Dayanim, but Rashi says it's also not just to be a Dayan, it's also to be an aid. Come across this throughout Shas. I think it was all the way back. Where did we have this? Back in like in Mayit. It was in like Mayit Cotton. Like Mayit Cotton or Megillah. Yeah, we had about this in Sachik B'Kuvia. Elohin Apsulin. It's a Mishnah. Hamsachik B'Kuvia, someone who gambles. V'amalva B'Ribis, someone who lends with ribis. Mafricha Yainim. We're going to see what mafricha yainim means. There's two pshatim. Either it means another form of gambling, or it means someone who uses, as we're going to see in the Gemara, someone who uses pigeons to trap other people's pigeons, to acquire other people's pigeons. But seichrei shvius, and someone who sells the produce of shvius. One is not allowed to buy and sell the produce of shvius, and this person did so. Nevertheless, all these people are possible to be dayanim and to be edim. There's a common thread. The first three of them are all some form of taking from someone that you should, some money that you shouldn't. And the last one, is profiting from something that he shouldn't. But the point is, someone who is mercenary, who has a strong taivas hamaman, is not kosher to be an eid or a dayan. It's not saying someone who who forgets to wear tzitzis. It's someone who has a taivas hamaman. He could be bought. So worry that he'll be possible as a judge. He could be corrupted, or an aid. He could be corrupted. So these all have that common thread. Amar Shimon, the beginning they were called people who gathered on Shvius. Misharabu Anasin, when the Goyim started to make life difficult. They called them people who sell in Shvius. We'll see later on. It has to do with that they would get involved with buying from other countries. When is this that we say that someone who is a mesachik b'kuvya, who gambles, is not going to be a kosher or a dayan or aid? That's where he's a professional gambler. That's all he does all day. That's all he does. He has some other job. He's really a brain surgeon, and he just likes to go to Atlantic City and gamble a little on the side. And he's kosher. This makes me think. Why is it that you have to have a din that goyim are apostle edim? There's not one. I was in the Bahamas. And they had a casino. Like everyone walked through the lot. Everyone gambles. It's like everyone who's, I think maybe a lot of Jews also do. It's like a normal thing. You just go and gamble your money away. Such a crazy thing. Everyone buys a lot.
People who don't gamble.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think it's like, but it bothers me that it's considered. It's not moral. There's no moral opprobrium in gambling. People say you shouldn't get carried away. You don't want to get addicted. It's not the etzem considered a bad thing. It's not like lying. Lying, everyone knows you shouldn't lie, right? But no one thinks you shouldn't gamble. They think you shouldn't gamble because maybe you'll get addicted. But just gambling itself is not. There's nothing wrong with wasting your money.
Free country.
It is. It's a free country. You can also lie.
Well, they try to prohibit alcohol.
Yeah, you can go in the store, buy a bottle of vodka for $20 and get totally.
Right, so
We all know.
didn't work. It didn't work out. So you should start prohibiting
I'm not
things.
saying they should prohibit it. We all know it's not a good thing. Like when you see someone drunk, you don't think better of them. Unless it's Purim. But is it morally drinking? So gambling used to be like drinking, and now it's not. Now gambling is fine.
It's not frowned upon.
It's looked at as a recreation. It's a kosher form of recreation.
Just go, it's okay.
Yeah.
There's a lot of worse things going on right now.
I'm not saying, of course, there's
Right,
plenty.
so it's all relative.
Yeah, I'm not saying they should prohibit it, but yeah. In any case, that's my observation. What's the problem with playing with dice? playing baccarat. Because the person who loses, he said, if I lose, I'll pay you money. We'll play roulette. I'll throw down the dice, and it comes out on black or whatever, however it works. He doesn't really want to lose. He doesn't expect he's going to lose. He thinks he has the trick of how to throw the dice. So he doesn't really want to lose. When he pays, it's really a little bit like stealing. When he said, I'll pay if I lose, he didn't really mean it. So when the person who takes it is a form of stealing, and therefore he's corrupt, and we don't let him be an aid or a dime. The problem is not that it's asmachta lekanya, because the guy has reason to believe maybe there is a skill to playing poker or whatever. I guess roulette also, there's some, you throw it in a certain way, you get it to fall on the black. So what's the problem? This is just it's decadent. You're playing with money. It's destructive. It's destructive to the world. And if we know that you need to have a market economy, people have to take money seriously. Money is what people use to you have to allocate resources based on how much supply and demand. And gambling is just throwing out all the rules by which a market economy works. What's going to be the difference? In either case, both these reasons show the person doing something wrong, and therefore they can't be trusted as an eid or daim. It can be the difference is going to be a person who sits. I misstated what I was just getting carried away with my own shita. The problem with but someone's a professional gambler is not contributing to the world. He's just he's just wasting away his days. So what happened? So that would only apply if he's a professional gambler. But if he's someone who has another job and he just does it part of the time, he can't say he's not Isaac Boom Nasa Shalaylam. He'd be Yeshuva Shalaylam, and therefore he wouldn't be a puzzle aid. Amr Yehuda, Emasai is mentioned in Lunomas Elahu. Aval Yesh Lunomas Shaloi, Hare Yuksherim, Almatam is Mishuva Shalaylam, who, from the fact Rabbi Yehuda explained, he said, Emasai, this is only when he doesn't have another job, but if it's when he's a professional gambler, but if he does have another one, then he's kosher. So you see that the reason is like the second reason. Right? The Mishnah made this chalak. We said the difference is going to be between the two sheets, between Rami Bar Chama, who says Mishum Asmachta, and Rav Sheshes, who says Isaac B'Shuva Shalayim, is going to be whether if he's going to be puzzled, if he has another job. But our Mishnah specifically said, Rav Yehuda said, it depends on whether he has another job. So l'chayra terayit Rav Sheshes, Kasha l'Rami Bar Chama, v'chitei mepligi Rabbanan l'Rabbi Yehuda. And if you'll say that this is what Yehuda said at the end of the Mishnah, that's his shita, but the Chachamim, the Rabbanan disagree with him, and they say it doesn't make a difference whether he's Isaac, whether he has another job, because they hold like Rami Bar Chama. The reason is because Asmachta lekanya, V'Omer B'Yishuv and Levi, Kol Mak B'Shem Rav Yehuda Emasai Ubameh. Whenever he uses the lashon Emasai in the Mishnah or Bameh, when is this? And he's coming to explain what came before. He's not coming to be chaylik on it. Rabbi Yochanan Emasai lefarish Ubameh lach. He said, but Rabbi Yochanan disagrees. He says only lashon Emasai. When Rabbi Yehuda says the lashon of Emasai, then he's explaining what came before. But Ubameh, he's coming to be chaylik. But in any case, the Kuli Alma Emasai lefarishu. Both of them, both Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, hold that whenever Yehuda says Emasai, he's coming to explain what came before. That means there's no one being chaylik on Rabbi Yehuda in the Mishnah. So who's Rami Bar Chama saying like when he says that it's Mesachim B'Kovi is also because of Asmachta Lekanya? So Gemara Gavra Karamis. You're asking because Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi and Rabbi Yochanan say they both agree that Emasai is lefarish. That when Rabbi Yehuda says Emasai, he's coming to explain what come before. Marsava pligi, or Marsava le pligi. Rami Bar Chama holds that he's chaylik. He says that even though Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says Emasai always is coming to explain what came before, he'll disagree with Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi's rules of interpretation. Rabbi Chama says that Rabbi Yehuda, when he said Emasai, was coming to be chaylik on the Chachamim, who said before that the reason is because of Mesach B'Kuvya is Asmach the B'Yalma. Can you really say that at the end of the Mishnah, when Yehuda says that if he's a only if he's a professional gambler, but if he's if he's only a part-time gambler, he's not going to pass. So Vatanya, Ben Sheyesh Lo Omer Shaloi Hu, whether he has a different job, Ben She'en Lo Omer Elahu, or whether he's a professional gambler, Hareza Pasul, he's going to be Pasul. So l'chayre, that's like Rami Bar Chama. So how could you say that only Rabbi Yehuda holds that it depends on if he's a professional gambler, but there's no one who's chaylik? But we see, how could Rabbi Shua ben Levi say Emasai is lefarish, but we see that there's no one who's chaylik? We see that there is someone who's chaylik, because we're saying that he's going to be pasul even if he isn't a professional, even if he's not a professional gambler, which would not work according to Rabbi Shua ben Levi. So Gemara, he Rabbi Yehuda mishum Reb Tarfoni. That's Rabbi Yehuda saying mishum Reb Tarfon. The Tanya Rabbi Yehuda I'm mishum Reb Tarfon. La'olam ein echad mehen nozel if he shalei nit naziris el laflo. He says, Lagabe, two people who were standing there, and they said, if this guy is coming down the road, if he's a Nazir, then I want to be a Nazir. Another one says, if he's not a Nazir, I want to be a Nazir. We say that neither of them become a Nazir. That's what Yehuda says, Mishum B'Tarfon, because Naziris can only be accepted if you say it in a decisive way, where you know what's happening, where you do it in a way that's determinable. But over here, since neither of them knows what's coming, there's no way of them knowing. So you see from here that it's because mishum asmachta leikanya. It's because that if you say that a person asmachta is kanya, when a person has some, if he accepts something upon himself, even when he doesn't know what the outcome's going to be, that it's not an asmachta, he's kaina. So in either case, it's nitla. We're going to find out later whether he was a nazir. So if you hold asmachta kanya, then it would be he should still be a nazir. Vice dice that this Reb Tarfon must hold like Rami Bar Chama that asmachta is like kanya. So therefore, we have Amanda Amar who's chalik on Rabbi Yehuda, who said the reason over here is because of it's not because of asmachta kanya, it's because of Isaac Yeshuva Shalaylam. And therefore, we have a chaylik that will support Reb Rami Bar Chama. Okay, we're going to have to stop over here.
Oh.